Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, to this discussion for future with Africa. It's a great pleasure for me to act as a moderator of this discussion, unlike in the preliminary program done toward Deputy Director General from International Cooperation and Resources at South Africa Department of Science and Technology, unfortunately could not come to this event. I am a senior researcher at the Nordic Africa Institute, which is based in Uppsala. My name is Liisa Laakso, and the research project I'm conducting there concerns the impact of political science on political developments and democratization in Africa. At this project, I'm combining my earlier research experience on elections in Africa and also my experience as a dean and then as a rector at the University of Tampere in Finland. We will start this program with opening words by Rector Jukka Kola, and then we will hear greetings by Mr. Pekka Haavisto, Minister of Foreign Affairs. Then we will have presentations by Mr. Jens Hugel from DG Research and Innovation from European Commission, Professor Kenneth Matengu, Vice Chancellor, University of Namibia, and Professor Petri Pellikka from University of Helsinki. And then we will have panel discussion. And the audience, both you are present here and you who are following us through the internet connections, you can participate in this discussion by using hashtag Eurooppa-forum and Uni-Turku. Please use those both hashtags. Of course, we will then also take questions from the audience. But let us first start by opening words by Rector Jukka Kola, who has just started his term as a rector here at the University of Turku. Previously, he was a rector at the University of Helsinki, my former boss there. And he has also himself, he has research experience from Africa, from several African countries, actually a quite large research project. So Jukka Kola's field is agricultural economics, which I think is most relevant for research cooperation with Africa. So please, Jukka, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Liisa. Can we get it on? Now, great. Thank you, Liisa. Very nice introduction. Hyvää huomenta. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You are all warmly or not so warmly welcome to this occasion. Let's hope it won't rain. It should be actually clearing up. Actually, the sun should be already here, at least when you look at your weather forecast. But then sometimes it's better to look outdoors yourself, not your weather forecast. But yes, indeed, warmly welcome to this occasion. And I may have some points. I don't know whether there are 3 or 4. It's sometimes difficult to calculate where you end up, although you may start with 2 points. But first of all, why we are here is very much about the fact and the future picture of Africa as such it's a huge potential there in Africa in very, very many ways. And then how we can collaborate with African countries better, in a more productive way, in a more long-term way, making it that kind of sustainable development for African countries, their organizations, their people, but also then how we can see it, like from the Finnish side, what could be done. Clearly, we are in search for more and more collaboration, and then it could be here in Finland between like our universities or different other organizations. It could be also in Africa between universities, other organizations, and very clearly we need more and more public-private partnerships, so that it's not the public sector separately from the business sector, but they should be combined, again, hopefully in a sustainable way, not looking for very rapid profits, but really building that kind of long-term collaboration to make it sustain and to make that kind of very productive results in the years to come and in decades to come. Then, when talking about this collaboration, this week on Monday and Tuesday, we had a very good, productive, interesting and innovative seminar here when we also sort of launched the platform for advancing and then strengthening innovation, and especially the Sustainable Development Goal number 9, innovation, between our collaboration, Finland and African countries. And also University of Turku has signed between UNECA, or with UNECA, this memorandum of understanding, and so now the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa and University of Turku will have that kind of closer collaboration in a very systematic way. And that will then also give this platform for any other interested parties to join that kind of important development. But then we can be the drivers like University of Turku and then UNECA, and please, you are all welcome to join that kind of platform to work together for a common goal. University of Turku, we are organizing this here now, and then we have been very active already a long time with African connections. Maybe nowadays the most active collaboration is in Namibia and in Tanzania, but still in many other countries too. And so that's also that how we can create that kind of north-south cooperative or cooperation systems and deals, that then there is a connection between like University of Turku and University of Namibia, and then we can then find some other universities in African countries who can join that kind of, let's say, good system already existing and strengthening their abilities to collaborate. And like I said in the beginning, we have to sort of build and construct this kind of collaboration on long-term view, long-term vision. We have to have trust, we have to have resilience, and we hopefully have to be innovative to finding also new ways to collaborate, and then also sort of producing the new kind of results, whether they are on the research and science side, but also talking about the public-private partnerships, so they are benefiting society in a very large and, let's say, multifaceted, versatile ways, and then creating together something much more is our intention and objective. And very likely this seminar will give us more thinking, that kind of innovative thinking, how we can proceed in the years to come and making very good results, which are really beneficial for all of us, of course, mainly there in Africa, but then we can be the contributors to that kind of actions and collaboration. So please enjoy. Let's hope there appears sun instead of rain, and then we can be even more active. And of course, we are waiting for active participation from the audience side. Let's start. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jukka. And now we will have welcoming words from Pekka Haavisto, Minister for Foreign Affairs of Finland. He was very much wishing to be able to be present here, but it happens to be so that the ministers for foreign affairs of the European Union member states are just now having a meeting in Helsinki, and he of course has to be there. He was appointed in autumn 2014 as the Foreign Minister's Special Representative for African Crises. Before that, Pekka Haavisto has worked as a European Union Special Representative in Sudan and Darfur, and as a special advisor for the UN in Darfur peace process. He has also led several missions to conflict areas as the chairman of UNEP post-conflict work in 1990 and 2005. And just during the just a couple of weeks ago, Minister Pekka Haavisto played also an important role in the reconciliation agreement that was done in Sudan. So now we will hear Pekka Haavisto's greetings to the seminar. Greetings. Oh, okay, now we start.
I want to greet all of you in Turku, Eurooppa-foorumi. I'm unfortunately here in Helsinki, in Finlandia House, having my guests, all the European foreign ministers here in an informal meeting during our EU presidency. One topic, important topic on the agenda for our government is Africa. We are planning an Africa strategy, a comprehensive view how we could enhance Finnish-African cooperation, including non-governmental organizations, including our business community, including municipalities, and of course our government and different kind of ministries. And we hope that this Africa strategy will somehow pave way also to the new African thinking in the whole European Union. We have to be equals with our African partners. We have to build our strategy together between European Union and African Union. I had an opportunity this summer to represent European Union in Sudan, in Khartoum, in last moment of the peace talks and in a signing ceremony of a transitional government agreement between the military and the citizens fora in Sudan. I think that was a moment when I felt very proud to be from European Union, because we have been pushing to this direction. We have been trying to convince the parties of the negotiation to sign an agreement, and we have been also working with the countries of the region that they should support unanimously the Sudan agreement. I think this is also a way to go. We can influence to sustainable peace in Africa, and we should influence that. Have a very good seminar day there in Turku.
So, thank you to our minister. And indeed, our government is preparing special Africa strategy, which we hope that will also strengthen the Africa cooperation of the whole European Union. In the fourth African Union and European Union Summit 2017, both continents declared investing in young people for building a sustainable future. That partnership aims at highlighting the importance of research and innovation, including research on migration, which perhaps is the most politicized question between our continents, and highlighting the importance of research. African Union and EU have extended their cooperation from food, nutrition security, sustainable agriculture, partnership on climate change and sustainable energy, just to mention a few areas. So this seminar, where we hope to discuss how in practice to enhance partnership in research and cooperation, is very timely. European universities, as we just heard from Turku University, are seeking for strategic partners and good locations on the African continent to have more impact and more partnership in the developments there. We want to advance education and research to enhance sustainable development, to find answers to the challenges of the future, and also for the excellence of science and excellence of research. So it's a great pleasure for me to invite Jens Högel, who is an experienced EU official who has background in engineering and experience in the fields of international development cooperation, public financial management, business development, and research and innovation policies. He has held positions, conducted work in Nigeria, for instance. Now he is in Brussels. He joined the Directorate General of Research and Innovations in September 2018, where he has worked in the area of diseases and emerging epidemics. Among others, he has managed infectious diseases financing facility together with the European Investment Bank. That facility has been very successful in supporting enterprises in the field of EU developing new in the field of EU developing new tools and treatments in the area of infectious diseases. Since last summer, quite recently, he has been responsible for the relations between the European Union and African Union and its member states, managing in particular the EU-AU high-level policy dialogue on science, technology and innovations. So please, Jens, the floor is yours.
So thank you very much for coming this morning, and I want to extend my greetings also and my gratitude also to the University of Turku and the rector in particular, who made possible that the European Commission is here today. As you heard, I'm working for the Directorate General for Research and Innovation, and I actually already before 2015, I was working in that Directorate General before I joined the European Union delegation to Nigeria and experienced firsthand the challenges African population is facing in the various countries, but in particular in Nigeria. So much, so good. Let's go straight to the point that I want to, or to the points that I want to make today. First of all, just a little bit of a background on our cooperation or the cooperation between the European Union and the African Union member states when it comes to research and innovation. So we have in 2007, the joint Africa-EU strategy was adopted, which contained a component on science, technology, and innovation. And this strategy is in principle the framework of cooperation across all areas of affairs. It can be trade, it can be environment, it can be research, it can be all sorts of things. And based on this strategy, we were happy to have endorsed by the Africa-EU Summit in 2010 the science, technology, and innovation policy cooperation, and that was sort of launched in 2011 by the first high-level policy dialogue meeting, or the summit of the senior officials that were brought together. So this is high-level policy dialogue. I mentioned that science, technology, and innovation. It is principally the cooperation on which we develop our joint programs, and we also have in this framework we have the biennial Africa-EU summits. We have the EU-Africa high-level policy dialogue on science, technology, and innovation. So that's the second bullet point here, which is in principle the driving force, or the advisory board, or the decision-making body in principle. You can probably call it like this. That's the best way. And this is meeting, or this forum is meeting every 2 years. It has decided in the past to set up working groups to look into particular areas of research. The first one that started in 2016 is the one on food and nutrition security and sustainable agriculture, a very obvious subject, I think, in the context of the collaboration of the two continents. And the more recent development is the new working group on climate change and sustainable energy. Because it only started in 2017, it is not as mature as the first working group, and well, I think we come to that in a second. But also, I put this slide with this picture on that I found on the internet. I hope I didn't do anything wrong here. What I like here in this regard is that you can see that the individual member states or groups of member states, in this regard, the Nordic member states, they came together to adopt the Vision 2030, which is talking about climate change, is committing the Nordic countries to certain measures to reduce CO2 emissions and to become CO2 neutral by 2030, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And it is an opportunity that we are having on our side with the working group on climate change and sustainable energy that the member states should really more actively take up in terms of collaborating with the African continent. So this is, I want to use this forum or this event today also to ask you to maybe think about contributing to this working group or become an active member of this working group, as we are still looking for members to drive forward this initiative. So going back to the policy context, of course, in research and innovation, we cannot live without a strategy, an international cooperation strategy that was already launched in 2011. And we have certain objectives that we want to follow. And we also have a dedicated roadmap for research and innovation cooperation with Africa, which outlines these are our priorities, and this is what we want to do in collaboration with Africa. And if you want to check further, please feel free to check on the internet. You will find all the various details there. So, as I mentioned, our current activities in terms of collaborating with the African continent relate to the food and nutrition security working group, the climate change working group, and we also have another initiative which is called the European and Development Countries Clinical Trials Partnership. It's a very complicated name. Sorry for that. This is an initiative that is driven by the EU member states and by some of the some of the EU member states and some of the African Union member states, and it's in principle there to allow, in particular, the African continent, the African researchers collaborating with the EU side, developing new treatments, developing new vaccines. When it comes to diseases, that could be tropical diseases, that could be diseases that have not been addressed sufficiently by the private industry, for example. And they are there really to drive this area of health research and the development of new interventions forward, also based on the fact that we are coming from different levels in this regard. So what I mean is you cannot apply solutions that we are having in Europe one-to-one to Africa for the simple reason that they might be much too costly and much too difficult to apply in the African context. I'm saying this because when you look at the African continent and the many countries there, they have many more challenges than just providing health solutions to keep the population healthy. It's more like there's a lot of issues with regard to budgets available or available budgets, with regard to governance issues, with regard to personnel and staff that is trained to provide primary health care, for example. So this is all the context that needs to be taken into account, and this is why you have a specific platform to provide solutions that are adapted to the context. Potential future areas are also being considered. What we would like to see is that innovators from the EU and from Africa work more closely together. That could be innovation hubs, as we call it, and Africa is there very, very strong in this regard. And it's not focused on one particular industrial sector or anything like this, but it's more a general drive of innovators in Africa that want to provide solutions to markets. We want to bring them together with the European innovators and allow them to hopefully proceed quicker than they would be able to do if they work independently. We also want to look into environmental research, because that is something in connection with climate change, of course, that is something that we need to put more strongly forward. Sorry, I only mentioned climate change, but of course, circular economy is also something that is very important. And the issue about migration was already mentioned. And it's not only migration from Africa to the EU, but also migration flows within Africa. And that could lead sometimes to violent extremism, or that is caused by violent extremism. And it's a question of how to address this to allow people to live in peace and security in principle. We should not forget also the European continent. On the European continent, there's a lot of migration ongoing. We should not forget that. So it's not like it's only always about Africa. Now, we have these two working groups that I already mentioned. And one of them, the food and nutrition security, it addresses a couple of challenges like the input management, water scarcity, food safety, and so on and so forth. So these are all relatively obvious parts of the puzzle, if you like, but they need to be considered also by the research community. And I think so far the researchers have been quite successful also in building the bonds between the African and the European universities, and to work on those subjects in order to provide solutions. Of course, what we would like to see is that a more broader-based participation is set up, which means we want to see more European universities to interact with their African partners We want to see that the social and the economic impact is really recognized not only by the researchers, but also by the governments in the EU and in Africa. That is something we're going to take into account very soon. You have a couple of grants that I put here on the slide. In total, I think from the Horizon 2020 budget, which is the European Union research program, about 160 million euros will be spent by the end of the duration of Horizon. Plus, of course, all the individual interventions by the EU member states. So you can say there is already a significant amount of money spent, but also a significant amount of cooperation achieved, which I think is very positive. And this is also why we are thinking in Brussels that why should we not try to broaden the scope of the high-level policy dialogue, the scope of our activities from Brussels with the African Union Commission colleagues, and try to engage on a broader basis. Just for you, if you still want to, as researchers, if you're still interested in applying for research topics, I put also here a couple of topics that are still open. Some of them at least, in particular, the last one here on the slide, which talks about diversifying farmers' income through small bio-based concepts. Now, the other working group is, as I said, is more recent, was more recently set up in 2017, the Climate Change and Sustainable Energy Working Group. It's about fighting climate change, a transition to low carbon and climate resilient economies, renewable energy, and delivering on the COP21 and 22 targets. This working group has been acknowledged also by the higher policy level dialogue of the African European Union Summit in 2017 in Abidjan, where it is particularly mentioned that the European and the African leaders would agree to increase the efforts in this particular working group. In order to prepare a research agenda and to prepare the next steps of cooperation, a particular project was launched in 2018 that is supposed to draft this research agenda and to present it to the leaders for the next summit, I believe, and then to also design the next steps in terms of collaboration, which means who is doing what, who is providing what, and so on. So I think also here we are making progress, although, and this is why I was saying we need more participation also from the EU member states, although we would like to see this more actively going forward. Upcoming topics also here in this area, in particular the one on 2020, the long-term EU-Africa Partnership for Research and Innovation Action in the area of renewable energy. It is still open, although only for a short period of time. And it will fund a couple of research projects which include EU and African researchers on an equal basis, hopefully. However, there's one caveat that needs to be taken into account, that insofar as these research projects will only finance 50% of the eligible costs, that means participants have to provide the remaining 50%. It's also a matter of trying to see more commitment from both sides. Then I finalized here the next steps under our high-level policy dialogue on science and innovation for the FNSSA working group. We will present hopefully in the next summit, which is supposed to happen in November, on 6th to 8th of November in Addis Ababa. We will present the monitoring and evaluation framework of the partnership, which, as I said, will look into what are the economic and social impacts of the various programs, and will hopefully also help us to guide the future cooperation. And then for the climate change and sustainable energy working group, An action plan will hopefully be developed that will look into the further implementation of the work and the research projects. So this is from my side. I'm looking forward to your questions hopefully soon, and I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Indeed, there are a lot of instruments and possibilities for Finnish researchers and universities also to participate in research cooperation with African research institutes. But that, of course, requires that we have strong partnership with African research institutes and connections and networks there. And one country with which Finnish researchers have and Finnish society has very long-term relations and cooperation is Namibia. And therefore, I'm very happy to invite the Vice Chancellor of the University of Namibia, Professor Kenneth Kamwi Matengu, to speak about partnership and research cooperation between our countries and research communities. Professor Matengu holds a PhD in human geography from the University of Eastern Finland. He holds academic posts of research professor at the Multidisciplinary Research Center Social Sciences Division at the University of Namibia. His research interests include access to equity in education, higher education, governance and management. With more than 60 publications, he has previously published articles and books on tourism, community-based management, decentralization and rural water supply. He also has interest in indigenous knowledge and speciality in innovation diffusion and technology transfer in the knowledge-based economy, as well as community resource management, poverty, social aspects of HIV and AIDS included. He is member of several international academic bodies, including International Geographical Union. He has also served as an executive to the Commission on African Studies and the International AIDS Society. He was recently appointed by the President of the Republic of Namibia as a member of the high-level panel on the Namibian economy. So please, Professor Kenneth Matengu, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. I would like to thank the University of Turku for the invitation, particularly the rector, for me to come and share a few thoughts regarding Finnish-Namibia partnerships. Before I do that, this platform makes me feel like a bit of a comedian, so I will start by a bit of a joke. Some of you may have heard the story that Africans have a tendency to answer questions by asking questions. And I understand that a British man sought out to find out whether this was true. And his first stop was in Nigeria, where he asked an immigration officer, is it true that Africans have a tendency to answer questions by asking questions? And the answer he got was, who told you? And then he went into some village and sought to find out, he asked, is it possible to see the chief of this village? And the answer was, but who are you? So as I conclude my presentation at some stage in the next half an hour or so, I do hope that you won't ask me questions. Anyway, what I hope to do is to just share the Namibian experience. As you know, Africa is a big continent, 54 countries, so I will not speak so much about Africa, but the point I would like to emphasize is that the European cooperation with Africa cannot be for Africa. It has to be with Africa. And that's the main point I want to really emphasize. I will pass these slides quickly. Some of you have seen this slide, I believe. And I would like you to think with me. What does it tell us? What does this tell us? It tells a story of power. It tells a story of energy or electricity. It tells a story of access. And it tells a story of where higher education and industry are interacting the most. And you would see that Africa tends to, that is why it is generally has been referred in the past as the dark continent. Can this change? And who would be the player to change this? Then you may have also seen this. This is a map that demonstrates the publication rate in the world. And you can see that Africa's presence is very, very slim. Yet, there has been a lot of research on Africa, but it's being published elsewhere. And perhaps also Africans in the diaspora doing research on Africa but publishing it elsewhere. And who has to change this? I think it's you and me. It's that partnership with Africa that we need to look at to see what we can do about this. Let me just say a few words about the University of Namibia. The vision of the University of Namibia is to be a sustainable international hub of excellence in higher education, training, research, and innovation. And we want to do this to contribute to the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals, the priorities of the country. And in doing so, we have to do so by cooperation. We have a very specific mandate as a university, and we are established by an act of parliament that requires us to pursue collaboration with any person, with any institution, both nationally and internationally. What we need is partnerships with EU, with Finland, but not partnerships for Africa, but partnerships with Africa. We would pursue international partnerships that are based on felt needs, not on perceived needs. Perceived needs do not lead to sustainability, but felt needs do lead to sustainability. And the partnerships we want to pursue are those that are based on strategic priorities for African countries and universities. These strategic partnerships or priority areas are defined in the African Union Agenda 2063 and in many of the countries' strategic plans that also filters to what Jen spoke about in terms of the science, technology and innovation strategy. And most important is partnerships that are geared towards building capacity, competence, and agility for future jobs. There is a big challenge around employability of graduates. I believe this is a global problem, but also a major one in Africa, where you have more and more graduates that are not absorbed by the industry or the public sector. And so we want to think about working together for creating those kind of skills that enables people to be employers and employable. Now, I want to share a few examples of our partnerships with Finnish universities, and I'll start with the University of Turku. One challenge that Namibia faces, especially in the context of climate change, is the issue of water and energy. You may know that with climate change, Namibia and Sub-Saharan Africa, but particularly Namibia and Botswana, are countries that are going to be hardest hit, are already experiencing the problem of droughts and severe climate impact. And so with the University of Turku, together in partnership with the Finnish company Solar Water Solutions, we have been working together on a desalination research pilot plant for desalination of seawater and making it potable for human consumption. This project was planned last year and it was launched earlier this year. And it was attended by very high-level delegations. The former president of the Republic of Namibia, Dr. Sam Nujoma, was present there. The vice president of Namibia, he was also there, Dr. Nangolo Mbumba. And of course, the former rector of University of Turku, the Finnish ambassador to Namibia, the two ministers, Minister of Higher Education and the Minister of Agriculture and Water, were all present. And this project is beginning to get high priority from the government to expand it to ensure that water becomes a much more important element of our collaboration. But also, there's another component to this, which is research on climate change, to look into the issue of carbon sink. And the researchers between University of Namibia and the University of Turku are working towards perfecting science around carbon sink, both on the trees, but also on the roots and soil capacity. The University of Turku also has programs at the University of Namibia, a sort of a mini campus there. One that is focused on the Master of Software Engineering. And the idea with this is to ensure that we work towards the creation of or production of future entrepreneurs using technologies, artificial intelligence and others. And also we have been working towards the idea of Namibia Finland Research Academy, where retired professors are contributing to capacity building in terms of supervision of postgraduate training of and providing mentorships to young researchers and mobility of staff and students, where the two universities second expertise and do research, joint research together and contributes to curriculum development and so on. Another example I'd like to give you is University of Seinäjoki University of Applied Sciences. And there we are focused on technology, food and agriculture. We are discussing the establishment of a food safety laboratory at the university and postgraduate program in the field of food science, nutrition and technology. One other project that we have been working on for the past 2 years is the conversion of invader bush into animal feed. And this has been funded by the local fund for cooperation by the Finnish embassy in Namibia. And as a result of that, we have trained 8 master students who are expected to graduate next year. Satakunta University of Applied Sciences has not worked with the University of Namibia as such, but it has been working with Namibia University of Science and Technology, the former Polytechnic of Namibia, and they have been working together in maritime engineering studies, logistics and ports management, and we are discussing that they would also support the University of Namibia's military science program on sea navigation and simulation. University of Eastern Finland, my alma mater, there has been many kinds of projects in the past, but currently those that are under discussion includes pharmacy education, church records and demographic studies. Some of you may know that the history of Namibia and Finland dates back to 140 years plus. And since the time the Finns got Namibia, there are records on parishes and marriages, so you can trace the whole family history, and that is the intention of this project. And we are also discussing the possibility of creating a Finnish Namibia alumni and diaspora network, which we believe would be an important way of leveraging the people that have been trained in Finland and perhaps expand this to Finnish Africa alumni network, so that these people are somehow coordinated and are able to do joint impact work together. And it would be interesting to hear your own thoughts around this. Then, lastly, I would like to say a few words about the importance of North-South-South cooperation, which as a university we see as very important in terms of our partnerships, even with the EU. We have more than 180 international collaborations that are active across the world. I think the only continent that we don't work with at the moment is Australia. Everywhere else we have partnerships. And we are focused on the promotion of entrepreneurship, innovation, sustainable development, and climate change adaptation. We are very active in many associations, including the Association of African Universities, Association of Commonwealth Universities, and the Regional Universities Association of Africa, where the Vice Chancellors sit. And besides Finland, we work very closely with the University of Zambia, University of KwaZulu-Natal, Jomo Kenyatta University of Agriculture and Technology in Kenya, University of Western Cape, University of Gajah Mada in Indonesia. We work with Cardiff University. We work with, I think, 17 German universities. At the moment, we have a big project that is funded for the next 12 years by the German Research Foundation on future rural Africa. And we also work with Ocean University of China, in China, and several other universities there. We are active players in the Southern African Innovation Support Initiative, which involves Tanzania, Botswana, Namibia, South Africa, and Zambia. And Namibia is the coordinator of this particular initiative. So we have opportunities to rally and work closely with the other South partners in creating that hub of excellency we intend to have. I would like to say that we need support to consolidate existing programs in many of the Southern African institutions that are based on the felt needs that needs to be just perfected and to produce specialists that Africa need. The strengthening of postgraduate programs, especially those that are focused on innovation and research, is quite important. We want to create regional research groups, not just for Namibia, but as a region, Southern Africa, research groups that are working together with the partners in Europe to create the capacities that are needed and to link business opportunities, to research work, and then hire top-level scientists from wherever. As a University of Namibia, we have international staff from 67 countries across the world, and we will continue to deliberately target those high-level scientists. And we also need more work to invest on online technologies and preparedness for the future. The proposal we have is to focus, to enable the University of Namibia to have an R&D campus that serves Africa by utilizing the partnerships that we have, and the focus of clusters of excellency is in precision agriculture, IT and big data, engineering and material sciences, medicine, energy and water resources, biotechnology, and indigenous knowledge. And there's particular interest in indigenous knowledge in that there is a lot more potential for business out of indigenous knowledge at the moment than in other fields. And we would do so by ensuring that we have these particular groups, but to focus more on high quality scientific publications jointly with our partners, and promotion of innovation and upscaling of the facilities. In conclusion, there's this African saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. But if you want to go far, go together. And for us, we want to extend this opportunity to hold hands with European institutions to go far together. And this image you have here is in the southern part of Namibia, which is a very interesting environment, which I would like to invite you to see one day. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Matengu. And the slides you showed about the division of scientific publications was quite shocking. The size of whole Africa was almost as small as the size of Finland, or at least the Nordic countries. But now I have a question for the audience, that do you know what is the continent which share of scientific publications in the world is growing most rapidly? Who can guess? I think the emeritus rector from University of Turku can answer this question.
Well.
Kalervo Väänänen, please.
It is Africa.
Yes, it is Africa. Maybe if there are any comments from the audience or questions at this moment to Professor Matengu or to Jens Högel, I can open the floor. Please remember also to send, you can send questions from distance. Also use the hashtag Eurooppa-forum and Uni Turku. I see the Ambassador Kari Alanko has a comment or question. Please.
No, he's...
One comment. Kari Alanko is my name, Ambassador of Finland in Pretoria, South Africa. This question about real partnerships is a very important one, because Kenneth was talking about, Jens was talking about what needs to change in our own thinking, or if I think about the European side, to go into real partnerships. And the same question also, what needs to change in, for instance, universities in Africa to go for real partnerships. One example is that we have several universities in Finland that want to cooperate with South African universities. They want to cooperate with the best South African universities also to gain something for themselves. But when we talk to authorities in South Africa, they often say that the Finnish universities should work with poorer South African universities to help those universities. So I would argue that very often the approach also on the part of African universities is that this is a sort of aid-based relationship, not a real sort of university collaboration relationship. How do we change that? And I'd like to make also one advertisement, which is that we will have an additional staff member at the university, at the Embassy of Finland in Pretoria, sent by our Ministry of Education, and the purpose of that person is to support collaboration and innovation between Southern African and Finnish universities, focusing on South Africa, Namibia, and Mozambique. Thanks. So we will have, I think, more facilities also in the embassy to promote this kind of cooperation.
Yes, indeed, and there is also linkage to the Nordic Africa Institute. The former director of the Nordic Africa Institute, Ina Soiri, is that person who will start in Pretoria to enhance our cooperation with universities in Southern Africa. Now I have a comment from Namibia Ambassador Boni Haufiku. Please.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us to attend this forum, which is very important. And I just want to add to the point made by my countrymen that we should go together. And it also was reinforced here. I happened to be in Brussels during the negotiations of EPA negotiations. That's economic partnership between the EU and Africa, various African regions. The perception you get in Brussels, even when we're at the negotiations, is that they tell you what is good for you. And we have been always saying, we can be poor, but at least we know what we want. And also it's correct that many Africans think of Europe because it's rich, it's just a handout. Unfortunately, sometimes we want to beg and even ask for what we already have. Africa is not the poor as you have said. We have everything. We are sleeping and walking on minerals. The only problem we have is a skill, technology. I think that's all what we need. But with partnership like this, I think we can work together. And I'm also announcing here that our Vice President of Namibia is coming here to strengthen that. And also he will be in Turku in few time, also to visit Turku and to enhance this type of relationships. We want partners. We don't want masters to tell us what we supposed to have. I think the world have changed, and the two minds have to change. Begging mind must stop also, and also people who knows better must also understand that even if we are poor, at least we know what we want. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Indeed, I think that it is in the interest of Finnish researchers to cooperate with African researchers and research groups, because partly because that is the continent where the potential is growing faster than nowhere else. I will now ask Professor Petri Pellikka to give his presentation about practical level cooperation between Finnish and African researchers. Petri Pellikka is a professor of geoinformatics with primary focus on remote sensing applications on land cover and impact on human-nature interactions on the environment at the University of Helsinki. His research group applies mostly optical remote sensing data and laser scanner data. During the last decade, or maybe 2 decades, the focus has been in Africa, and particularly land cover and land use change caused by agricultural expansion and conservation, and its impact on water resources, biodiversity, climate, and livelihoods, issues which are very important for societal development also, and even peace in the area affected by climate change. Professor Pellikka is also a director of multidisciplinary Taita research station of the University of Helsinki. The station is in Taita region in Kenya. It provides research questions and solutions from sustainable science to earth system science for students and staff of the University of Helsinki from various disciplines. I have had the pleasure to visit the Taita research station a few years ago, and I have to say that the work you are doing there has been or is quite impressive. But please, Petri, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Liisa, for your nice introduction. And very nice to see you also here listening to us today. I'm very pleased to come back to Turku. I left University of Turku 17 years ago, and I think this is my second official speech in Turku in 17 years, and I hope that I will get some more in the future. Very nice to be invited here. Okay, I think I pressed the green button for the next slide. You see this nice photograph? This boy is called Petri. He's the first Kenyan who is called Petri. He's a son of the manager of the Taita Research Station. I'm very honored that he's named after me, and I feel that I'm a godfather for this boy. He's leaning on an instrument. We are studying agricultural practices with my university professor Laura Alakukku in this site. You see those tubes, and there's a sensor there and some other sensors here and there. So we are really grounded with the people, and we are having remote sensing things done, but also environmental sensing done in many places. But I'm not really going to tell about the research we are doing in Taita Research Station. I'm trying to give a more bigger picture about the research cooperation with African universities and other organizations, since I have really a background of 17 years about that. And actually, first time I went to Kenya was 30 years ago for my own master thesis, and then I went back there as a professor with my students and my colleagues, and now I'm giving a talk about this experience. Well, Africa is a continent of future, but we are having a number of megatrends taking place there, challenges, problems. We have huge population growth, migration caused by that, partly urbanization caused by population growth, partly again climate change is a driving factor for migration, maybe population growth is causing climate change. These megatrends are really linking to each other. There are a number of democracy processes and technological development also taking place. Me and my colleagues, we were just writing some study to Finnish Foreign Ministry about these megatrends, and this will be published very soon. These 6 different topics were considered. But these megatrends are something for which we need to tackle. We need to provide capacity building, education, research capacity and methods for African scientists, and especially to train young generation which is there in Africa waiting to be solving these problems or challenges. And really the population growth is maybe the start of this one. It will be doubled in 30 years in sub-Saharan Africa. So there's the largest number of youth in the world in Africa, and that's very much driving to cities. Urbanization takes place faster than anywhere in the world, and that's at the same the key challenge and also opportunity. There's huge growth potential because there are so many young people. We have also found that secondary education of females has the greatest potential to decrease fertility rates. So education, again, in the secondary schools and universities. At the same time, to tackle these problems, we need technological solutions. Also, there's a big growing service sector creating opportunities for innovations. So we need policies for job creation and educational opportunities. And behind this, and a tool for this, again, in my mind, is capacity building, also through universities. And then we can tackle problems of climate change, population growth, and urbanization a bit better. I'm sorry the photo is down there in the bottom, but that's a primary school in Kenya full of young people looking for the future. I was first time in Kenya in 1989. Then I was counted to be a citizen of Mombasa, since I happened to be during the census day in Mombasa. Now I was hoping to be calculated as a citizen in Makta with this family, but it didn't take place since the numerators who were supposed to come there in the night were afraid of elephants. So that kind of sort of basic problems still exist. But Standard newspaper in Kenya then released some numbers from the census 10 years ago and also estimated numbers for this year. So this is very typical for African countries, the high population growth. In Kenya, it's not so strong maybe than in West Africa. But if we see there are a bit more people in the primary school, double many people in the secondary school nowadays, and at the university, more than 100% more students. So there's a very good strength that education really seems to take place. There are mobile phones by everybody nowadays. Mobile money is used by 50% of the population, and internet access is almost for every people in Kenya. Kenya is mostly most advanced from sub-Saharan countries, but this shows the big trend in technology and population growth and also access to studies. We in Finland, as universities, we can help the sub-Saharan African countries to reach the Sustainable Development Goals by supporting academic education in Global South. And a good example for that one is Finland itself, since Finland has invested a lot to education. I'm the first master or doctor in my family, both from my wife's side and from my side. And it's really the free education which makes it possible to use every good brains in a small country. And this, what we have developed in Finland, we should take that as part of the global responsibility to the South. And really I hope, and I think it is there already, that education is a spearhead of development cooperation and Africa strategy of the Finnish government during this next season. Everyone should have a right to study, as education also promotes democracy processes. We've been doing university cooperation with about 10 universities in Africa. We are seeking at the University of Helsinki a partnership with an African university, and first we were looking from South Africa because they are ranking the best. But at the same time, University of Nairobi and Makerere in Uganda, they are also ranking very high. But why should we carry out university cooperation with African universities? Well, at the University of Helsinki, we had a slogan, and I still is, that we are for the best of the world. It means that maybe we want to be the best in the world, but at the same time, we want to do the best for the world. And that really depicts the global responsibility we have. We can work with the big potential in Africa, tackle the megatrends and local problems, since we share the same globe and the same climate. So in Africa, when there's a land cover land use change taking place, it affects also the local climate and in the end global climate. So the problems and the processes in Africa are also ours. One question is also that should we work with the best universities or with the other universities? Ambassador was saying that in South Africa they are saying that you should work with the poor universities in South Africa and not with the best one. And I really agree that, since what I have learned myself, that when you work with a small university, they are much faster to move and their motivation is much higher maybe than with the big African universities. And also when we are working with small universities and with a big one at the same time, we can develop South-South cooperation between those universities. One thing we have to remember that, I don't know if you can read that last line over there, that University of Helsinki or Turku or any from Finland is not really a big university. When we go to Nairobi or anywhere, they know Helsinki, yes, but mostly they know Cambridge and Oxford. So we also have to be very humble. We can't sell that we are going like this. We have to be just like we are in Finland, that we have to take into account that we are not really the top of the world. There are challenges, of course, cultural differences in research, publications, and so on. Of course, communication, networks with data, online courses. And regarding to the project preparations, what I have found out since I've been doing several with African universities, that the experience in different instruments of the European Commission or others, it's quite limited. And also what comes to the project management and reporting, it also should be advanced, but it's something at the same time when we are building capacity in education and research, we are also building the capacity in project management and reporting. And really what I've seen that we can make a greater impact working with the poorest universities. We were also in Eritrea proposed by Minister Pekka Haavisto, and we made a geoinformatics master program in Eritrea, and there we for sure have bigger impact than in Kenya. So we've been also working in other countries, not only in Kenya. One thing is also the expectations from local universities. Sometimes I'm not feeling very good as we are considered as sponsors and not partners. So it's something which will come in balance also year by year. And of course, that's understandable that if we are funding, then we are kind of sponsors, but we want to build partnership and do together. There's one line there, what I'm benefiting from this. I don't mean myself, but this is about corruption in the way. This is something what professors in Africa are asking from me. How do I benefit from this personally? And that's a bit disappointing. This happened some years back, and I was quite green myself, and I was thinking that we do nice cooperation, but then this professor was asking, how do I benefit from this? But it hopefully will change in time. The last question is here that can we do world-class research with university from developing country? Not yet, but it will happen. I'm sure about that. We at the University of Helsinki with Professor Olli Vapalahti, who is standing here. He just published a world-class paper about Ebola in Kenya with University of Nairobi and Masai Mara University. We can do that, but it takes time. But I think first we are concerned about global responsibility. University of Helsinki has partnerships with Peking, Stockholm, and recently with Edinburgh. Now we seek for partnership with University of Nairobi. We chose Nairobi also since it's from developing country, unlike South Africa, which is considered a bit more developed. It's the best university in East Africa, but it's also a science hub. We have UNEP headquarters there, number of international research organizations. So there's really academic hub over there, and there's more potential for world-class research as well. And also we have a long cooperation history in many fields, not only mine. And now we have a new trial. We tried that 3 years ago, and now it seems to be that the partnership will be closed very, very soon. At the same time, we are having MOU to be with Taita University and and also with Somalian State University. There's a process for that. We do also work with international research organizations, with ICRAF, IRRI, ISIPE. They are all based in Nairobi. They are really good. They have Western standards, but they're also doing business, and that's kind of the problem. They have very high overheads. We like the research with them. We've been having a number of projects funded by the Finnish Foreign Ministry, but for example, with ICRAF, we had once a project. We were sharing the work package. We were sharing the funds 80 and 20 in the work package, 80 for ICRAF, 20 for us, but the workload was totally different. So the cooperation with international organizations, it's good, but sometimes the balance in work and funding it's a bit obscured. Well, Jens was telling about European Commission funding instruments. Maybe there's something about how Finland funds research cooperation for Africa. This was something what Minister Paavo Väyrynen invented some years back. He called them regional projects, and the aim was to strengthen cooperation, scientific cooperation between African countries, and also with Finnish scientists in environment, climate change, and food security. University of Helsinki carried out 3 projects who were partners in Food Africa. I wasn't taking part in that, but we were partners in Biodef and CIESA. And in those ones, we worked with a number of African universities, and students were visiting Helsinki and making also PhD theses in Helsinki, but also at JKUAT in Kenya and also at the University of Nairobi. Academy of Finland has an instrument called Development Cooperation Program, which has been funding our Taita studies quite nicely, and it's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs which funds 75% of that one. That follows Finland's development policy objectives, of course, since the funding is coming from that source. There are rules nowadays for that 50% of the work is to be done in Africa by African collaborators. And this will continue, this funding instrument. Again, and hopefully it will be a bit bigger during this current government we're having in Finland. HEIIKI, Higher Education Institutional Cooperation Instrument, is funding capacity building with African and also Asian universities and other higher education institutes in 10 different program countries, Namibia, Kenya, for example. And now the aim is to support new and fragile universities more than the big and existing established ones. And the outputs of this one are improved capacity to provide high quality education for more students down there, and capacity and relevance also of teaching of the higher education institutes will be improved. And again, there are themes given: solving learning crisis, climate change, of course, and innovations. And we just heard this week that there are 67 applications submitted last week. 20 will get to the second phase, and about 10 will be funded, and they will get about 1 million euros each. So this instrument is not actually very big in terms of the money, but it's still something. With this funding, we are now doing Geoinformatics Master Program in Taita Taveta University in Kenya. Then there's a SIMO grant, which is the only scholarship system Finland provides for developing country students. I've been having these 6 students with that funding in Finland, but it only gives funding for 1 year, and after that, the host, like me or my colleagues, we have to find the rest of the money for them. And these 6 ones, they are almost all currently professors in their home country or actually alumni in Canada. But this is kind of what I would see good if we had better funding instruments for scholarships in Finland, since when these people go back to their home countries, we are having right to collaboration partners over there in science, in research, but also maybe for companies, for Business Finland. Well, I don't go too much to international funding sources. Jens was telling about what European Commission provides, but we also have big international foundations like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and MacArthur Foundation, which are funding research kind of work also in Africa. Well, in the end, I go to Taita studies, Taita research station, since that's really my background. We are currently working in many fields with a number of cooperation partners, but it started in very small. 30 years ago, there was a field trip to Kenya funded by Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and I was a student then making my own master thesis. And then when I got my job in Helsinki, I went back as a professor with my students, and we received the first project called Taita quite soon. And we were doing quite simple things, developing remote sensing methods for land use change detection methods with GIS as well. The next phase was to apply the data we produced for environmental conservation planning and community-based natural resource management, also funded by the Academy of Finland. Then we had a chance to buy the buildings which belonged to Norwegian Church actually, 2009, and then we opened the research station there 2011. At that moment, we had been doing about 6 PhD theses, about 20 master theses already, so it's quite easy to convince the VC of our university that it's a very good idea to buy the research station in Kenya. Then the Finnish Foreign Ministry was interested in our research. They funded this GESA, Biodef, and Aferia. We further got funding from the Academy of Finland to study water management, water resources in Taita-Taveta County. Then we were working with this Taita GIS capacity building. And currently we work in the Smartland project together with Taita-Taveta University about environmental sensing of ecosystem services for developing climate smart framework for food security. In that one we work also with some other Kenyan universities. Last but not least, we are supposedly getting funding from Gates Foundation through European Commission for Earth observation and environmental sensing for climate smart sustainable agripastoral ecosystem transformation in Kenya and in Ethiopia. I'm just listing these project names here to show that it started very small, but it's going wider with number of people, and I have been having good colleagues and sponsors for this work. The outcomes have been about currently 25 PhD theses, mostly at the University of Helsinki, but also in Kenya, in Tanzania, in other European universities, and about 70 master theses, mostly in Helsinki in geography, but also in virology, atmospheric sciences, agriculture, forestry, veterinary sciences, geology, and biology. So it's really multidisciplinary research station, having also some theses done in Tampere, Aalto, and Jyväskylä. And by the way, we have an advisory board, and there's one member for University of Turku, who is Ilari Sääksjärvi, actually. And we also have a member in the advisory board from Aalto University. Next year, just to show that we are having 2 high school visits, so only we are giving this education for Finnish high school students that they learn what is Africa, since in Finland still this year people are having some obscure vision what is Africa, and I hear it very often that this is not like what is written in the school books. So Kauniainen High School is coming the 5th time to Kenya in January, and Porvoo High School the 3rd time to Kenya to use our research station premises. And we are also getting good students to study geography and biology from these students coming over there. Also, the station is used by other universities like University of Oslo and University College London. Speaking about the small university here at the end, we are planning a MOU with Taita-Taveta University, and this Taita GIS works with them. but we are only not training the people who are students at the Taita Taveta University. In the master program we are having workers from Kenya Wildlife Service, Nature Kenya, Taita Taveta County, Kenya Forest Service as well, and there are more programs in planning. So we are expanding the capacity building beyond the university students to the local communities. The same with Smartland project, that it's not only, even though we work in Taita Taveta County, University of Kapianka and JKUAT are partners. JKUAT is from Nairobi, and we are having also PhD students in this Smartland from Kenya Forest Service and Kenya Wildlife Service. We are organizing a big seminar October 1st in Helsinki, telling about the outcomes of this Taita GIS and Smartland, and you are most welcome to take part in that one. It's the whole day seminar organized in Kumpula campus in Helsinki. Well, what is the way forward? Well, I think the theme here is the research, cooperation, and capacity building in education in Africa. So it's quite clear that that's really the way forward also in my mind. Here you see actually my student Morten Puström, he's making a map, and you see these young school children interested in GPS and mapping devices and laptops. So that's really one of the growing potential what we have there in Kenya and elsewhere in Africa. The current funding instruments are fine in my mind. The budget only could be bigger, but in addition to these current instruments Finland has, I would very much like to see more scholarships for the African students and Asia, of course, and Latin American. If I compare this to what happens in Netherlands, they are funding scholarships for MSc and PhD students for African students to do that in Netherlands, and that funding comes from official development aid funding. And in China, there are thousands of African students studying law, medicine, atmospheric sciences, and ever. And if we would have this scholarship system also in Finland at that strength, we would have more people like Mr. Magenda in Namibia, who would be familiar with Finnish system and the cooperation with the Finnish people, and I would see that would be very much for the Team Finland work as well. So I think we have quite a lot of things to tackle, the global challenges, the global megatrends, and one way to overcome that is to work closer with African higher education institutes and research cooperation partners. It's also for our own benefit because we are sharing the same globe and the same climate. Finally, I'd like to thank University of Turku for the invitation and this Eurooppa-forum as well. And very happy to say also as a last comment that the first ambassador of Kenya, Mr. Matti Kääriäinen, seems to sit there as well. And he was the one who took us very nicely 2004. My student group, we started the night at the Mount Kenya. We drove down to Nairobi, and Matti has invited us to the residence of the ambassador, having good food and even sauna there at your residence. Nice to see you, Matti, again. Thank you very much. Looking forward for the panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Petri. And now we will move forward in the program to a panel discussion. I will invite all the presentators to the stage, and I will invite also Niina Käyhkö, who is Associate Professor in Geography at the University of Turku. Her area is Digital Geospatial Research at the Department of Geography and Geology. She has specialized in landscape change analysis with combined uses of digital geospatial data. From 2003 onwards, Niina Käyhkö has been intensively involved in research, education and development cooperation in Tanzania. She has been leading around 15 projects with funding from the European Union, Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Finland and private companies. Most of her research activities are in the interface of science and practice, and she has had a strong emphasis of coupled research education projects with competence development impact. So welcome, Niina, also to our discussion.
Thank you.
For the audience and those who are following our discussion from distance, I remind that you can send comments and questions by using hashtag Eurooppa-forum and hashtag #UniTurku. I'm reading the comments, but so far there has not been any direct question to any of the presentators. Let me start by this discussion and round with our panelists by coming back to these different kind of funding instruments as Petri and then also Jens were describing. We have at the Finnish universities and research institutes, we have experienced quite drastic downturn in research funding. And actually also the rector of the University of Turku has reminded that we would like to see researchers doing research and not writing applications for funding. And this, I think, is one key issue for research excellence and for the cooperation with African research institutes and universities. I think that we cannot overemphasize the importance of continuity. Now there were several interesting and good research instruments presented, but maybe the average length of funding is maximum 4 years, or maybe it can be a bit more, but 4 years, I would say, is not enough to build a strong partnership and capacity for really cutting-edge excellence level in scientific research, which in any case is what is in the interest of university teaching and university research. So the first question, taking into consideration this volatility of government funding, the first question is that how should we balance this needs for long-term capacity building and excellence in research? How at the universities we should allocate our working time and the university resources, and what are the other stakeholders? And now Minister Pekka Haavisto said that he hopes that there will be a new kind of content in EU-Africa relations. So what kind of support could we expect from development cooperation or from other stakeholders or other governmental sources? Maybe we start from the same order as you gave presentations. So Jens Högel from the DG European Commission Directorate General for Research and Innovation. Maybe you can start our first round of comments.
Yes. So thank you very much for your question. I think it's a very relevant but also a very complex question that bothers not only researchers but also the policymakers at European and at member state level for a long time already. And there's no one solution for everyone. Every solution has to be adapted to the conditions that you find. And even in the EU, we have various, we have member states, 28 member states, that are working or that can participate in the European programs to various extents based on their own scientific excellence and the areas they are very good in. Some member states can do this very well. My own home country is certainly not too bad. But you have, for example, the new member states or the new member states that joined in 2004 that are still lagging behind it, that are still having challenges that are not only related to funding. I think, and this is also something that is already something that is dating back a long time. The knowledge or the idea that researchers have to be more outspoken about what they are doing and what they can achieve. And also at the European level, and I think we are going into the right direction, if I may speak out of the box. We are trying to integrate the researchers' interests into the overall picture of external relations of the EU with the African Union or with any other country around the world. Research is, you can consider research, or research is considered a soft tool in external relations, soft tool in the sense that it can open doors, it can open new ways of collaboration that would help also other policy areas or to make progress in other policy areas. And I think this is something that is still underestimated, the possibility of researchers making these contacts and collaborating with the researchers outside the EU is still underestimated in terms of its impact. Because the impact is not only related to the various scientific fields that are concerned, but the impact goes much further. It addresses the general relations with third countries. It addresses the way the collaboration is being built, and also it addresses the way trade relations can be extended, for example, and can be worked on. So what I'm saying is, from the EU perspective, that we need to use research, and we want to use research as another tool that we're having in our toolbox to build the external relations with third countries in particular, and also by doing this and by building partnerships, we can also then benefit all of us from those partnerships. I mean, we should not underestimate, as I said, research as an important tool. We should not forget research and innovation for a long time has been the founding or the stepping stone for industrial development. I mean, without research, there would be no industrial development. We should not forget about that. Without research, there would be no solutions for health problems. So research is absolutely needed, but we need to come out of the box. We need to be more outspoken about what we're doing, what we can achieve, and how it would contribute to partnerships beyond research, of course. This is what we're doing. We still need to be much stronger at the European level, also within the institutions I'm happy to be able to represent one of them, but this is for me absolutely essential. And then, if we would succeed in doing that and achieving that, we would probably also be able to see that the funding would not be only short-term funding, but that funding would also be available on a longer-term basis.
Thank you. Maybe I could invite now Nina to say something about the prospects of scientific cooperation and research cooperation from the experience you have had in Tanzania.
Sure. There is, of course, a bit of a paradox when we are talking about the scarcity of funding resources, because I do believe that at the end of the day, it's not really scarcity. There is money and there are resources. It's more that they find the right implementers in the right momentum. I think we are, however, in a bit of a position to rethink our universities' overall role in the society, that if we think that we need to be able to address sustainable development initiatives in the grassroots level via education and research, then we have to accept that the definition of the high quality research or top research has to be reinterpreted a bit differently as it has been conventionally done. And by this I mean that there is a call for impact-based research together in joint teams, and in this case, of course, together with our African institutions and colleagues, and that pushes our governments to rethink the instruments they are offering to us. Because at the moment, it feels that many instruments allow one thing to be done, but they disinclude something else. And this actually cripples a lot of the potential that lies within education institutions. Combining research, combining capacity development, education, combining impact-based research that makes a difference for the development. I feel that this is a major issue in the political level to be done.
Yes, and as your work shows, you can have a very practical orientation into research, but I assume that still the kind of research questions and approach are something that you have freely formulated. Now, the other side of the coin, of course, if the interests and needs of the stakeholders are too strong, there is very strong thinking for value of money, and the relevance of the research is regarded as something that is beneficial or supports the interests of the funders. And as scientists, of course, we have to be able to give also critical views and to ask new kind of questions. So that, I think, is the core of the tasks of universities. Perhaps if Professor Matengu, you could also reflect a little bit about the question of continuity. You were listing quite impressive cooperation activities and partners you have had in Finland also, but have you seen that kind of strong continuity which have strengthened the capacities, your own research and research infrastructure capacities to the extent that supports that kind of independent research and independent approaches to questions of sustainable development, for instance?
Well, I think any partnership has to have components of capacity building. There's maybe a question earlier that was mentioned on whether or not European or Finnish universities should work with poor or weak African universities to build them. The reality is you need capacity to build capacity. So in order for those institutions that may be seen to be weak or poor to develop capacity, they need to be capacitated. And in my experience, the best way to do this any form of partnership has to have components of building capacity to the extent that these people that you work with become peers. They cannot just be to be mentored and to be recipients in perpetuity. We have to build that capacity so that they are also able to be at a stage where they are deliverers of high quality, where they are partners, not sponsors, where they are putting something to the table as well, not just the recipients of whatever would be in place. The challenge seems to be that the financing of projects tend to be short term, sometimes 1 year or 1.5, maximum 4 years as you indicated, and this creates gaps in that capacity building, in the sustainability process. But as he indicated, there has to be some level of commitment on both sides to enable the partnerships to be sustainable. Many African governments have defined the percentage of their GDP contribution to research. So that political commitment has been there. I know for Southern Africa, the commitment to R&D is something like 3%. But this political commitment has not come with political action. And that's the problem. I think the only country that is really seriously financing research is South Africa, Egypt, and Tunisia. So political commitment is good, but it's not enough if it doesn't come with political action. On the other hand, you have a lot of private sector work in Africa, but they are not investing in research. These multinational companies that are, whether they are in mining or fisheries or whatever they are doing there, they are not investing in research. Their R&D work is elsewhere. And I think this leaves Africa in a very weak position, and it should not be the case. They have to be committing to research work also there. Yeah.
Yes, the target of funding for research and development of the Finnish government is also much higher than the reality. The target is 4%. We are now at the level of 2.7%. And we are eagerly looking at the budget proposals of the government, that whether they are genuine in the aim or not. But I think, personally, I think that in order to reach the level of 4%, we really have to enhance our international cooperation. And that includes also cooperation with these emerging African research centers and universities. And that includes also, of course, not only government funding, but also funding from the private sector. So maybe I give now the floor to Petri Pellikka to reflect this discussion, and also with this question concerning private funding. I think that the field where you work is also something where there are commercial interests, maybe in terms of the equipment you are using, but also the kind of results and analysis you are using, or your graduates might be then using or doing. So how do you see the potential of business stakeholders or participation in financing excellent research?
Thank you, Lisa. Actually, I think this question is better for Nina, since she is doing company cooperation in Tanzania. But I step back a bit on this short funding periods. It's very understandable that you get 3 years, 4 years funding. The longest I've been having is 4 years. But when I started in Kenya, 2003, I did not think I will continue this long and having this so wide. And same as with Nina, she's been in Tanzania more than 10 years, 15 along. In any case, and I think when you do the work well, then the next project comes. If not next year, then it will come. So the idea is really that you just accomplish, you just do as good work as you can, and then the continuation comes to your research. Well, then about this question, you are right that the field I am in, which is about working with laser scanning systems and with weather stations, air quality research, and like that, there's a lot of potential to create business both in sub-Saharan Africa. For example, in Kenya, there are a number of high-class companies doing airborne remote sensing, doing weather monitoring, citizen-based science as well in Nigeria, Kenya, South Africa. And I think that's really a potential also for the Finnish companies to do cooperation with those companies. Vaisala has a headquarters, not a headquarters, but office in Nairobi. And TerraSolid making the world's best laser scanning data processing tools. They have regular customers in Eritrea, in Kenya, and so on. So this creates markets for Finnish companies, but also it creates the business in Africa. I've been told earlier, already more than 10 years ago, that it's not the development cooperation sub-Saharan countries what they want business development. So not really anymore the old-fashioned things, but more to enhance the industry and technology, especially when, for example, in Kenya, when and other countries in Africa too, that they are stepping over the old technology which is here in Europe and Finland. I mean, with mobile banking, internet, the landlines never really developed in Kenya, but the mobile telephone markets are huge, and people are doing more things with those down there than we do here in Finland. And there's really great potential in technology fields.
Yes, I think that mobile technology probably is one example showing that that countries or societies that are lagging behind have the most potential to benefit of new technology, and that could be a kind of strong incentive for Finnish business also to work with African researchers. So there is this potential to implement new innovations and to come up with new innovations, which is quite. I mean, the scientific proof is quite robust on this, and the gains that the research and scientific work can have for economic growth in societies lagging behind is remarkable. So I would like to invite also the audience to participate in our discussion. If you have any comments, please come forward. So we have here in the front, is Irinia having, or somebody having the microphone? Here in the front, please. And if you could introduce yourself.
Yes,
please.
My name is Meraf Tesfaye, and I'm working in OBO Academy as a project coordinator. And very interesting presentations, and thank you very much. But my question is, I think, mainly about the thematic areas in funding. You were talking about the Heikki, Edufi, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, etc. The thematic areas are now changing to climate change, innovation, and the education crisis. And there are some projects that were previously funded, and their thematic areas do not necessarily squarely fall into these new areas. And so, in those terms, what do you think is the best way to kind of guarantee sustainability of the project? Because, and also, do you also think from the presentations I kind of gathered that these thematic areas are also echoed by the European Union, the African-European cooperation strategy? Do you think that that's a correct assumption that I'm making? And also about the sustainability mainly is my concern and question. Thank you.
Thank you. We take another question. Ambassador Boni Haufiku, please. Meanwhile, you can think about the
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really a problem to build a relations that you want to be equal with an unequal partner. And I think the lack of it was already emphasized here. We need to build institutions. In Africa, power sometimes belongs to individuals. When that individual leaves, the whole project collapses because there are no institutions. I understand the colleague from EU are saying, yeah, they want to establish equal relation with the African Union. You are not equal with them because your structure is different, is supported fully with funded by the EU. I was in Brussels. You are sponsoring our colleagues there to prepare a meeting, Africa-EU summit. You are funding them, you are accommodating them, you are transporting them. Now you put up an agenda that's supposed to be agreed at that level. I mean, we are already unequal, we are already unfunded, funded here. And you don't even have a support from your government. Because the colleagues, your colleagues in Africa unions have applied the job as, they got it. They cannot have the same power because they don't represent their governments there. They are seeking for jobs and they can be kicked out anytime. You are representing in Brussels, you are supported by your ambassadors, you are supported by your government, and you are funded. And that is the problem.
Thank you. Kalervo Väänänen, please.
Thank you very much for excellent talks. If I combine what Kenneth was saying and what Jens was saying, and now they are not listening, but is that actually if we want to develop research and development not for but with Africa, then it means that also the funding structures we should start to plan them that they are joint. I don't mean 50-50, but something where it's a really joint effort. So my question is now that how much the European Union has joint research programs with the African Union? And if I continue this, I think that also at the national level, so far we tend to think that if there's something which is related to Africa, so mostly we think that it should be taken care of by the European Union. But I think that what Ambassador and what Kenneth was saying clearly indicates that we also need bilateral agreements and bilateral funding programs, which means that in our case, for instance, Academia or Business Finland, and then some countries, so that we are not covering the whole Africa, but with some specific country. So I would be happy to hear some comments on this. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's have a round again. Who wants to start? Petri.
Well, yes, I have to reply before I forget what I was planning to reply. Well, I think the question you raised, it's about the policy made by Board of Education or by the Foreign Ministry of Finland, that this Hei-Iki targets now to climate change, technology and learning crisis. For me, this climate change topic is good. We've been doing that research fine, so I didn't mind about that, but I understand it causes some problems then for the others who want to apply to different fields, but that's politics. I mean, that's kind of control, and they want people to study and develop these things. in terms of the European Commission, there's also climate change very heavily on the agenda. I've been making 3 proposals to them without getting funding during the last years. No funding for Africa from the European Commission so far. But I mean, it is something, if the funder asks for that, then we have to make a good proposal for those fields and maybe deviate a bit what we've been doing earlier and look at from different aspect, how my work fits for learning crisis, for example.
Jens.
I'm just a little bit hesitating. I mean, well, in terms of, I'm starting with the last question, because that is not necessarily easier, but it's something that I had already a response in mind, and that is, of course, you need to have bilateral programs as well, and we fully appreciate, at the European Commission level, we fully appreciate the initiatives taken by member states and by individual universities to cooperate with partners, whether it's in Africa or anywhere else, because I'm sure we are all talking about the same the same objectives, the broad objectives when we talk about whether it's climate change or food security or health or whatever. I mean, the challenges are more or less the same. Of course, if you break it down to the country level or to the even regional level, region in the sense of the particular region in the country, you need to adapt, of course. But in broader terms, I think we follow the same objectives in this regard. So, and I think we are mutually reinforcing each other. When Finland is cooperating on Earth observation, for example, with South Africa, was it? Kenya, exactly. Then this follows certain objectives that are similar to the ones that we are formulating at European level. So this is why I'm saying it's mutually reinforcing. What I'm missing there, of course, well, that's my personal view, of course, is that we need to exchange much more between Brussels and the individual member states, because what we're having is we're having 1 or 2 committee meetings a year in Brussels. We are not, in terms of international collaboration, we are not too much involved with the individual program committees that are taking place on the various thematic areas. And from that perspective, I think we need to reinforce our collaboration also in terms of the international collaboration. What can we do? What can we achieve? And so on. But that's my personal thinking. Huh? It's like, sorry, I'm just losing my chain of thought.
We don't hear you.
Joint programs.
Joint programs.
Yeah.
Sorry. Yes. Okay. Well, I think that there are already a larger number of joint programs ongoing. Huh? When I think about the current partnership, well, I call them now partnerships because this will be also the term that will be used in the future. The partnerships between researchers and industries, for example, at European level. We have like the IMI partnership, which will be extended into the next framework program. We have not so much with industry, but they are also maybe on the sideline involved. We have the EDCTP that I mentioned earlier on today. And they all follow certain principles, again. And these principles are agreed at European level, and they should, of course, apply also, if possible, and if considered useful, they should apply at bilateral level. and I think those partnerships will be extended also in terms of the scope of the activities and in terms of probably also of the funding of these activities for the future framework research program. Now the collaboration, for example, with Africa and to build the partnerships would also mean that we need to have not only the political commitment from our partners in Africa, but also to some extent the resources that need to be committed. And that is something that is, for many countries, developing countries in particular, is very difficult. As I mentioned also earlier this morning, they have many challenges that need to be addressed. But of course, if we can see some commitment, I'm certain that would also help the to put more weight on these partnerships and to see through that the impact of those partnerships is really valorized in those countries, maybe also in our countries, but in particular in those countries that are still different from the European Union member states. So this is what I think would need to happen in the future, more commitment. And as I said, I'm not talking political commitment, but I'm talking also the financial commitment. Whether we can achieve it directly with the countries, or whether we can, I mean, I'm just again thinking out of the box, whether we can facilitate our colleagues, or we can convince our colleagues in the development cooperation branch to integrate better the research component into their activities, is something that need to be discussed. And I think they are in DG DEFCO, they are already on a way to do this. But of course, they need to have a certain focus. Because even on our side, also we have limited resources. If we would have the resources that we would wish for, then the world would be paradise. But it's not like this, sorry.
Yes, but I think that in the field of education, higher education in particular, something that we should do also in Europe is, of course, harmonization of the degree programs. And that is a key for student mobility. And I have to admit that in Finland we are not where we should be in the Bologna process, and now we are talking with Africa about a partnership allowing greater student mobility, and we should really enhance the capacities of African universities also to look at the content of the degrees, so that we can ensure the quality of higher education, and we could enable not only student mobility but also teachers' mobility. Yeah. And there the question is not necessarily about money, but about coordination and coming together. Now there was one question from the audience related to one of the megatrends Petri spoke about, namely the population growth. And the question was that why there is so little discussion about birth control in Africa. So maybe Petri can say something about population growth and the kind of prognosis we have also for the dividend of the population growth and how it is, what are the megatrends there. But before that, I will give also the floor to Nina and Professor Matengu.
Regarding
so,
the
please.
Previous one, or regarding the previous, or this one, or what?
Well, you can choose what you want to comment.
In general, I think there's if we think of the partnerships and funding instruments, we really have to be able to do synergetic management of the actions that we are doing, because we have a lot of overlaps. We have plenty of universities, plenty of partnerships already existing, and there's an enormous amount of overlaps. In order for our partners in Africa to be able to handle an enormous interest that is being addressed towards Africa at the moment, we need those solid partnerships that they can handle that in a clever manner. I think we cannot afford poverty of mind what comes to our cooperation with Africa. And by that I mean is that we really need an intellect and wisdom on how to create new generation of global citizens, because we are not only developing here a certain country or certain institution, but we are creating a generation of knowledgeable youngsters, and their mindset has to be beyond the current challenges. I think we can move forward with more questions, and I think that was so well addressed already, these issues earlier.
Professor Madengo, do you want to reflect this point, or?
Maybe two comments I would want to say. First is that there are indeed synergies between the themes that the European Commission and the African Commission see. These, to me, are very clear, those synergies in terms of the thematic areas that we work with. And what has to be more defined, I think, in the future is the depth of commitment and influence in terms of what should actually happen on the ground. For example, if you look at the issue of health, there are different health questions in different parts of Africa. And the amount of resources that would be committed to those different questions is very different. And I think that is where there has to be more discussions, more interaction in terms of what the real issue is. Because there are these differences of what is a perceived problem and what Africa feels is a problem. I think those are the things that needs. On the population issue, Africa is a young population. We have to take advantage of the population dividend. We know that out of the 50 or so countries that have the fastest growing economies, maybe a third of those are in Africa. The question is this high population growth a problem? Maybe it's not a problem now, but it could be a problem in the future if we are not preparing for it. In terms of the questions around food security, the risks around that comes with climate change, which may trigger migration issues, which may trigger competition for resources and conflict. So for me, I think at the moment, the high birth rate is not a big issue, but in future it could be if it's not planned for.
What is the population of Namibia at this moment?
Well, the population of Namibia is 2.5 million.
2.5 million, quite a big country.
Geographically, Namibia is twice bigger than Finland.
Yes, that's also good to remember when we are talking about the population growth.
Yeah.
But Petri, do you have a comment on this mega trend?
Well, maybe I'm not the best person to discuss about birth control, since I have 3 children myself. And well, in the family there in Taita, I was showing picture. They have 6 children. That's quite a lot nowadays in Kenya. The highest fertility rate in Africa is in Niger, in 7 per woman, and in West Africa it's typically more. In South Africa, Northern Africa, I think it's around 2 to 3 children at the moment, and East Africa is also following that trend. I was speaking with a taxi driver in Nairobi this weekend. He has 2, and he said that's totally enough for himself. But I think the population growth goes with the development trend in a way. In Finland, my father-in-law, they had 12 children in his family. They were born during the 20s and 30s. And now people hardly have 2 children, typically it's 1. About birth control, well, you know how birth control works. But I think really that people in sub-Saharan Africa realize that especially when there's growing urban sector and urbanization, that less children is maybe easier to tackle. I have no further comments on this topic.
Thank you. I think we are coming towards the end of our panel, but I still give opportunity for all the panelists to say that what is the key message for Finnish universities and their supporters and their the stakeholders for the future cooperation with Africa. What do you think would be the key message at this point? We can start with Jens.
No, not me again.
Okay, I change. We will start with Nina.
Well, I think the key message from the academic institutions' perspective is that we have to be very clear on the values based on which we work in Africa with the Africans. Values are those which drive our long-term decision making, and they are those behind which we can stand straight. And if we are clear with which values we follow in the academic cooperation, then we are going to a path which is more sustainable. The other issue is that whatever we do today, and this relates also to your question of the pace of funding being only for 4 years, there is a wisdom in that as well, because Africa's situations are changing enormously rapidly. Urbanization is a driving force of that continent's realities, and we must be agile in the ways we cooperate. So if we have a good value base, but agile approaches on how we cooperate, we can adapt to changing conditions and always ensure that we are doing right things towards that global citizenship building that I was referring to earlier. And I think we have to have energy for that, and we have to have mind to do it in that way.
Okay, thank you. So key messages, Professor Matungu.
Well, I think I can only say that Africa is big. Its population is 1.3, 1.4 billion now. It's not one country. Although we may have global approaches, global perspectives, the actions has to be local in order to respond relevantly to the needs of each country.
Thanks. And Jens, key message.
Well, key message, and I don't want to talk about this issue about birth rates, because I think that is something that is that needs to be discussed at the country level. And again, whether it's Africa or any other African Union country or any other country, it is the self-determination of the country to address an issue, and whether it includes birth control or birth rates or whatever, that is their business. But of course, what we can do from our side is we can outline the consequences, and we can try and see whether the thinking in terms of consequences is the same on both sides. And then we can probably take from there give certain political impetus. That's it for me on this point. On the other point that I wanted to mention is, what I would like to see really is that Finland and all the other EU member states continue their bilateral and strengthen maybe even their bilateral cooperation with the African Union. not only for the, and this has been mentioned several times, not only for strengthening the partnership, and I emphasize partnership in capital letters, but also to keep challenging the European Commission in terms of international research collaboration, because this is what I mentioned before, and I think it is really lacking a lot. And I would really like to see more impetus from the member states driving us in the direction that is agreed between the European partners, and which is, as I see, is very much missing. Sorry to say that.
Thank you. And Petri, key message.
Well, I actually like what Nina said, that we have to think what are our values and also why we would like to work there. And once we know that and what we are doing, we also have to be committed then to take that until the end, starting something to follow up. Of course, with the funding, then we need to find further funding, but in a way to safeguard what we are starting the cooperation with the practices, that we are then also safeguarding that it continues over there. What Kenneth was saying about that Africa is very diverse, that's so true. It's not really one country, it's many countries, more than 50 countries, and so there are different solutions for every country. How many local languages? There are more than 1,000, I'm sure about that. But the way we've been working there in a few countries, only when we find a good method, good solutions for something, then that could be a model taken to other neighboring countries at least, and sort of multiply the work done then in other environments and with other partners. I think that way we can sort of get more impact as well. Well, Africa is large and very versatile, thinking about from Mediterranean coast down to the Cap. West Africa Francophone, East Africa maybe Anglophone. We have to tackle many languages as well. I mean, these international languages and cultures. It's a big thing.
Thank you. We are now in the last minute of the panel, and on my part, I would like to continue by saying that we need this kind of discussions, and we need to debate, and we need to make ourselves and the work we are doing at the universities and research institutes visible, and we have to keep noise of the cooperation we have and the networks that exist. So on my part, I want to thank Turku Eurooppa-forum. I want to thank the organizers of this panel, Ms. Riitta Mustonen and Irinia Paakkanen. Thank you very much for bringing us together, and the work continues. Thank you.
Okay. Kiitos.